Greetings, I'm Bill Klatke and I'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Neighborhood Beat. Our show today looks at Muslims in Maryland. What are they doing? How are they helping Maryland? And who are they? Our guest is Mr. Zahir Rahman, who is a member of the Baltimore County Muslim Council. Zahir, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Bill. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. First of all, for those of our viewers who are unfamiliar, could you tell us a little bit about the Baltimore County Muslim Council?
Sure. The Baltimore County Muslim Council was founded in 2003, and it was organized by a group of Baltimore County residents, Muslim professionals who have been living in the area for decades, and really their goal was to create some sort of way that Muslims living in Baltimore County could impact and participate in society. One of the main purposes of the Baltimore County Muslim Council was not only service to the community, but also building community, putting people in touch with their elected officials, getting involved in a lot of really important ways.
Oh, thank you. How long have you been involved with the council?
So I was there when it first started. I was born in Baltimore County, lived in Baltimore County my entire life, went away for school. But when I was in middle school and high school, my parents were one of the founders of the Baltimore County Muslim Council and elected officers of the group. So growing up, it was a really important part of my childhood because when we did soup drives or food drives or collecting money for the homeless, we did it under the banner of the Baltimore County Muslim Council. So as a young youth, it really impacted my own personal feelings towards public service and community service.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So in some ways, it's had a significant impact on what you want to do with your life.
Absolutely. Looking at my own life, looking especially at my Islamic and Muslim values, the ones of community service and community buildings are ones that I got from the Baltimore County Muslim Council, and it's ones that they've always stood for and have continued to stand for, and it's been great to kind of see them grow, seeing how their events, starting off used to be small and primarily of Muslims, and now growing almost 10 years later, including elected officials, non-Muslims, and people from all over the community coming together to build something.
Well, when you're doing something right and doing something positive, people tend to get involved.
Absolutely. And we've seen that, the Baltimore Muslim, especially Baltimore and all around Maryland, the communities of Muslims have been here for a long time, but in the last 15 to 10 years, we're seeing Muslims getting more involved in public service, more involved in our communities. And the Baltimore County Muslim Council has done a very good job of kind of navigating that and kind of spreading their responsibilities in three ways. We see that we're trying to do community service, community outreach, and community building. And we're doing all three of those things at the same time, and we're trying to do them the best that we can.
That's a tall agenda.
It is.
All those, that's a tall agenda for any group, for any society. Mm-hmm. And I know that and I'm not going to plead. I'm going to break the third wall here. And,
okay.
and I've been working with especially Akbar Ansari at the Baltimore County Muslim Council for years, and Good Neighbor Week activities and other things to build community and to work for positive change. And so I really appreciate all of the things you folks are doing, and I'm glad you can come on today and talk about this. One of the many reasons why I wanted to have you come on was to really break down for a lot of folks some of their stereotypes and misconceptions, really, about Muslims in Maryland and the United States. Because there's not a lot of knowledge, despite, I think, the focus of the media the last 10 years. There's not a lot of real knowledge about Muslims in Maryland.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about the history of settlement and the realities of today?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me start by maybe talking a little bit about more of what we do as far as how our values and, of being Muslim, especially breaking stereotypes, even back to the days of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, the idea of helping those less fortunate is something that's very, very strong in our faith. And that's something that the Baltimore Muslim Council has done very well. So as far as our community service activities, we have run coat drives every year for the homeless, collecting sleeping bags for the homeless. And we have a food drive every year, which raises about 5,000 pounds of food, as well as around $5,000 every year. and we partner with the Maryland Food Bank, and we try to get that food out every year. And every year we do tree planting. There's a saying in Islam that he who kind of plants a tree in this life will have a tree in heaven. So there's this idea of environmentalism in Islam that's very strong. So every year they do a tree planting exercise in the Gunpowder Park, and we bring young Muslims from all over the state together to plant trees, and we try to do it. It's great, you know.
I bet there are a lot of trees now.
There are a lot of trees.
That's wonderful.
And
forest.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic event. You know, it gets a little hot. They try to do it in and around Arbor Day to kind of to do this kind of coexisting thing. So they do a very good job at that. So as far as community service, it's something that's very important to us. As far as community outreach, you know, to break these stereotypes, it's extremely important for us to kind of get out there, you know, let people know what our values are and how similar they are to most Americans.
And the fact that we share in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition,
Right.
we pray to the same God.
Absolutely, yeah, you know, and there are little things like that, you know, that only come out through conversation. So you mentioned Good Neighbor Week. So the Baltimore County Muslim Council under the Baltimore County Executive has partaken in the Good Neighbor Week, and it's something that's, you know, even more important for Baltimore Muslims because of these stereotypes that you mentioned, that we need to break those stereotypes. So reaching out to our neighbors, getting to know our neighbors, it's something that all American Muslims, Baltimore Muslims have as a duty. So that's been a very important part. We've also partaken in interfaith activities with Christian and Jewish brothers and sisters across the county, which has been very important. And we've even kind of facilitated conversations between the FBI and the Baltimore County Police Department and our Muslim communities. You know, that barrier has been one that has stood between those behind the badge and minorities in the entire American history.
That's true.
And so American Muslims, Baltimore Muslims, need to kind of understand their own rights, understand their security and their role in our society, and partnering and talking with the FBI and the Baltimore County Police Department has been a very important step in that. And then finally, you know, community building. We have to engage our elected officials and, you know, leaders in general, whether they're elected or whether they're leaders of churches or synagogues. It's important for them to know that Baltimore Muslims are here and that they are interested in working together to kind of build our county to the best that we can. So we've touched base with our governor, we've touched base with our lieutenant governor, our attorney general, and held numerous events to sort of facilitate that sort of outreach. And hopefully looking forward, you know, the Baltimore County Muslim community is a significant one, and it's continuing to grow. And it will be an electorate sooner or later, you know. So it's important that our elected officials know that we're here and know kind of what we stand for and how we can hopefully help them do their job better.
Joining the dialogue.
Absolutely.
Joining the dialogue, and that's important. And that's the American way. It's also the American way to appreciate that diversity. And the way we appreciate diversity is frankly, first, we're aware of it. And second, we look at the fact that, as you said, we are very similar.
Sure.
We are very similar. First of all, we're all Americans.
Right, of course, absolutely.
We're Baltimore County residents. Yeah. There's so many things we share. So many things we share. Let's talk some numbers.
Sure.
Roughly, of Muslims in Maryland, roughly, where are they?
It's tough. You know, the number game is extremely difficult. As you know, the census doesn't take religion into account, which makes it even more difficult.
Not very much.
I can give you a couple of statistics. You know, nationally, the understanding was there are about 7 to 10 million Muslims in the United States. Recent numbers by the Pew Research Group and other independent agencies have seen that number fluctuate anywhere between 2 to 7 million. So it's extremely hard to say the numbers. I could tell you that at one of the larger Muslim places of worship, at one of the largest mosques in Baltimore County, the Islamic Society of Baltimore, a Friday prayer, which is the equivalent of Sunday Mass, brings about around 2,000 people. And so that's just that one event, you know, so it's hard to kind of estimate other than that. Yeah. But you'll find, you know, people who you didn't know that were Muslim are Muslim, you know, and they've been living here for a long time. You know, there are people who immigrated to this country and are now third, fourth generation Muslims living in Baltimore County. They're small business owners, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're engineers, they're scientists. They're all over, you know, and they have participate in the society in a very positive way for their time being here.
One of the things I think that surprises some folks too, thank you, is the diversity of Muslims.
Absolutely.
And the fact that Muslims don't all look the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, you asked me before about the history of Muslims in Maryland. In 1735, one of the earliest recordings of Muslims in the United States was actually in Maryland.
Really?
There was an African slave that was living in Maryland. His name was Ayub ibn Suleiman, and he was a slave in Maryland that was freed by James Oglethorpe, who was then the founder of the state of Georgia. And it's really interesting to kind of trace that history to know that, Muslims in Maryland are just as old as crab cakes and football, if not older. And so it's really important for us to kind of recognize that history. And, in addition to just talking about immigrants, you also have a very large African-American Muslim community in Maryland, specifically in Baltimore. The Nation of Islam, the W.D. Muhammad Mosque, and now the American Muslim Society have all really, really strong roots in the city of Baltimore. And that's, a nationwide movement, religious organization that really has a very strong hold in Baltimore. So when we talk about Muslims in Maryland, we have to talk about not only those who are native to the lands of the United States, but also those immigrants, coming from South Asian communities, Arab communities, African communities. We really have a very, very large
from
representation.
Croatia,
Absolutely, yes,
Bosnia,
everywhere. Bosnia, yep, of course.
Yeah. And the settlement patterns probably have been the same as most other groups, in that when war and oppression strikes a community in
Right.
another country, that there's more of a desire to emigrate.
Absolutely, and we're also situated. Largest Muslim communities you'll see are often on the West Coast and the East Coast. The East Coast is
Because they're closest
they're
to
closest.
other countries.
Yeah, of course. And so we have a lot of immigrants who have come to the United States. But my parents settled in Baltimore in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, and we know family friends who have been there much before us. So it's interesting to kind of see how we've become a part of the nation's fabric, especially a part of Baltimore County, in a place that a lot of Muslims call home. So seeing the growth has been very crazy, because I know my parents are originally from Bangladesh. They settled in Canada in the 1970s and moved to Baltimore in the 1980s. Seeing how our community has grown has been very interesting, as far as now there are younger Bangladeshis coming to Baltimore and having kids. And my parents, I guess, in some ways are the first generation of Bangladeshis, and now we're seeing second and third generations of Bangladeshis coming to Baltimore. And owning gas stations, owning businesses, owning restaurants, being doctors. We're seeing Muslims kind of in all specters of society, which has been very interesting. And personally, seeing Muslim-owned restaurants is something that we didn't necessarily see 20 years ago when I was a young child. So seeing the growth.
So there's more diversity of employment.
Mm-hmm. Diversity of employment, we're seeing that. We're seeing diversity in the places people live. Originally, a lot of Muslims used to live around one of the oldest mosques in Baltimore, the Islamic Society of Baltimore. So we have a high concentration of Muslims there. But now, as more mosques are being built in White Marsh, in Owings Mills, in Randallstown, we're seeing these Muslim communities spread.
Is there the type of residential settlement around the religious center similar to the what I guess used to be the Jewish?
Sure, it is similar, and I think a lot of it has to do with people living close, obviously, to their houses of worship. Muslims pray 5 times a day, and so being able to conveniently access those areas is important. So a lot of Muslims make that a first priority. In addition to finding good schools for their children, they want to live near these places where they can pray daily.
Absolutely.
One of the greatest partnerships that the Baltimore County Muslim Council has had, and Muslims in general in Baltimore County, has been with the Jewish community.
That's wonderful.
We've partnered on numerous events, and they've kind of really taught us about how to become a part of Baltimore society. And they faced prejudice the same way that we are now, and we have a lot to learn from them, and they've taught us a lot, and they've been wonderful partners looking forward. Rabbi Steve Fink has been extremely important in kind of helping us with these kinds of projects. And so overall, the Jewish-Muslim relations in Baltimore have been very great, and they've been such a great community to work with, and we're very happy to have their support.
That's very encouraging. Let's also underline that to folks that Jews and Muslims get along very, very
Absolutely.
well
Yes,
in this
yes,
country.
yeah.
And that is true, frankly, across the country.
Yeah, you see that relationship, and I think a lot of it has to do with history of prejudice and history of kind of how to make it in America, you know, and we share a lot of values with our Jewish and Christian brothers and sisters, and living in America where we have the opportunity to both of Jewish and Muslim groups being minorities, you know, having that experience is a shared one, and so we're able to kind of get rid of the politics and kind of concentrate on those types of things because it's an experience that's shared. And so, I mean, growing up, one of my best friends was Jewish, and I got along with him extremely well, and it was a very similar relationship because we all had friends, you know, who didn't know anything about Judaism, didn't know anything about Islam, and we shared that experience. So it's something that, you know, looking forward, I hope that relationship continues to grow, and I hope it's something that's replicated across the country.
I hope so too. Discrimination is something that I know that the Muslim community unfortunately faces.
Mm-hmm.
The national statistics show that after 9/11 it spiked,
Yep.
and while it is leveled off in some ways, it is still there. Is that something that you find in Maryland very much?
Yeah, you know, it's tough. We read in the news these kind of horrible instances of, you know, mosques being burned or people being spit at or attacked.
And vandalism.
Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, I've had my own run-ins with these sorts of things, whether it's, you know, playing basketball and having kids on the sideline calling me Saddam or calling me Osama bin Laden. There are little things like that. Personally, I've never been attacked or nor have I known anyone in the Maryland community specifically to be attacked. It's this sort of psychological oppression and prejudice that really hurts us the most. I was talking to one of my best friends last night, and we're talking about, you know, there was a CNN poll done about 2 years ago where it said about 70% of Americans have disfavorable opinions of Islam. You know, that's a lot of people. And so every day when we're in society, whether we're going to the gas station to fill up or buying something from a convenience store, when you hand over a credit card that says your name, which is clearly a Muslim name, you kind of think, what does that person think of me? Does this person think that I'm a part of the society? Do they know that I was born here? Do they think that I'm part of a religion which advocates for violence? Do they think that I'm part of a religion which discriminates against women? You know, it's a tough feeling, and you feel like you don't belong sometimes. So being able to kind of balance that with the types of good works that you can do as an American Muslim, you know, the types of duties and responsibilities you do have, has been something that's been very difficult. A lot of us have this sort of mentality where we feel like we're a representative not only of ourselves and our families, but of our faith. So when we do something good, when we hold a door open for an elderly person, when we participate in Habitat for Humanity, we're doing it not only for ourselves, but we're also doing it as representatives of Muslims in America.
Yeah, you are in fact missionaries to the unconverted.
Yeah, well, in some ways, it's not necessarily missionary work, but it's more of a work to let you know that we're here, we've been here, we're born here, we're American.
Goodwill ambassadors. Really.
Yeah, exactly, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for relating that, because it's important that folks understand that the hurt of discrimination and of prejudice,
right,
and of that as you described it, I think very eloquently, that suspicion and that misgiving and that unease that you feel, and it's something that, as you've said, is not appropriate. It's not legal. Muslims are protected as other religious groups from discrimination.
Sure.
And it's not something, finally, that's American, because we are, finally, all Americans, despite and frankly, I would underline, because of our diversity.
Sure, absolutely.
We are such a diverse country. And that is what makes us strong, but it is also what makes living here sometimes difficult.
Absolutely, you know, and there are different ways that the Baltimore County Muslim Council and Muslims in general have kind of combated those things. In one way, it's our own personal actions, you know, volunteering, opening doors, being nice to people, smiling, you know, very simple things. The Baltimore County Muslim Council recently held an event entitled Teachers Appreciation Dinner that was specifically for Baltimore County teachers who have included diversity in their classrooms or cultural awareness in their coursework. And so we honored about 25 teachers with an award for these things, all of which were nominated by their principals, and had a dinner of about 400 guests, including the county executive Caminance and Baltimore Superintendent Joe Hairston, and as well as other elected officials. Come to this dinner and kind of honor those teachers for what they've done. We talked about each of the teachers and their accomplishments and what they've done for diversity in the state. It's to kind of to show that, as Baltimore Muslims, one of the most important things that we value is education, and so these people who are public servants and have served our students and our families in so many ways, just a night to honor them and to kind of pay them their dues, because that's something.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, to say thank you and to specifically, credit them for including diversity and cultural awareness in their classrooms. The best way that Muslims can kind of interact with other Americans is for other Americans to know who they are, to know what their values are. So being culturally aware, diversity aware is something that's extremely important to Baltimore Muslims, especially at a time where a lot of Americans are ignorant or just don't know anything about Islam.
Right.
So the teachers that are doing that, we applaud them, and we had that night for them, and it was something that was really, really well done. And hopefully looking forward, it's something that we can continue to do every year, honor the teachers who are kind of teaching our young people to kind of have open minds and to kind of accept people for who they are, not based on stereotypes.
Sounds like a wonderful evening and something that every group and every person should do, is to
Absolutely.
say thank you to our teachers and thank you to people that are trying to make this a better community.
Yes.
And certainly that is what Muslims are doing.
Yes.
I must admit that it has been a pleasure for me to work with members of the Muslim Council over the years, and to see the extent that Muslims are involved in community building.
Right.
A lot of things that folks are not aware of, but which strengthen our communities, that help the folks that need the most help in our communities.
Absolutely.
The Muslims are right there doing it.
Absolutely.
It's right there doing it. How can someone find out more about Muslims in Maryland?
Sure. Well, we have a phone number and a website that hopefully are appearing on the screen. And, the best thing that they can do to learn more about Muslims is to just talk to one, And Muslims live all over Baltimore, all over Maryland. And hopefully if you know one, that's great. If you don't know one, find one online on Twitter or on Facebook. I'm sure would be happy to talk to you. Just the other day, I was just talking to a woman in the grocery line, and she started asking me questions about Islam. And, Muslims in America, they have a responsibility to kind of talk about their faith, We live at a time where transparency is probably the best thing that we can offer.
Absolutely.
So just to go and talk to a Muslim is the best way to get rid of stereotypes, because we're all people, and we're all Americans, as you mentioned earlier. So to kind of gain that understanding, I think, is extremely important. I don't know if this is the right time, but I'd love to talk about maybe one of our future goals is
Please,
the Baltimore County Muslim Council. Looking forward, I can narrate to you a short story of growing up in schools in Baltimore where our holidays weren't necessarily respected or recognized. Muslims have two main holidays. They're called the Eid, and they come in two different parts of the year, and one honors Abraham's sacrifice of his son, offering to sacrifice his son, and the other commemorates the end of the month of fasting, Ramadan. And neither of these holidays are recognized by the Baltimore County public school system, nor are the students given off. On top of that, students who have to miss school on those days, they do not get a perfect attendance for that year, even if everything else is perfect. So this is a project that the Baltimore County Muslim Council has been working on, and hopefully, looking forward, they're able to do that. When I was in school, I was on the basketball team during the month of Ramadan, and so what I used to do is before practice, our fast break would end at sunset, which was right in the middle of practice. I would sneak an M&M or a cracker in my waistband. I'd go through practice, and as soon as I looked outside and I could see the sun was down, I would quickly stuff it in my mouth so I didn't disturb practice. Mm-hmm. At the end of the month, I asked my coach if I could miss practice one day because of our holiday. And he looked at me and said, "Zahir, if you care about this team, you'll be there for practice." And so I was put in a point where I had to choose between my religious values and celebrating this holiday with my family or my commitment to my basketball team.
That's very different.
And personally looking back, I chose the basketball team. And looking back, it's something that I'll always sort of remember as a day where I wasn't able to kind of stand up for myself. And that's a position I don't want any Baltimore County student to go through. So looking forward, I hope that we're going to be able to work with the teachers and work with the administration to kind of rectify that wrong. And that's something that's very important to us because either recognizing that day or giving it off will give Baltimore Muslims a sense of acceptance and a sense of a feeling that we belong here. And it opens dialogue. People will be asking, why do we get off on this day? And it gives us an opportunity to speak about our faith and about our religion.
And frankly, it's just fair.
Absolutely.
It's just fair. We recognize Christian holidays, we recognize Jewish holidays, and even if it's not a legal holiday, it is something that most teachers, most employers, most colleagues will honor and respect. And it's something that I think, again, going back to being just American, that's an American value, is that not only tolerance but respect.
Absolutely. And it's time, American values are great. We love our values, but it's when our institutions don't reflect those values that we have problems.
That's
right. So this is one instance where we can see that happening, and there are plenty of more instances where it can happen more in society as well.
How can folks help more in that? They can contact the council?
Absolutely, yes. And, a lot of our Habitat for Humanity efforts, our interfaith efforts, our tree planting, we welcome Muslims and non-Muslims alike. It really, the most important thing for us is to get Muslims involved in our society and to interact with non-Muslims. And even in our mission statement, it's not about building a Muslim-centric Baltimore County. It's about building a county for Muslims and non-Muslims together that's better for all of us. So we welcome everyone of all faiths to come out and join us, and we hope to continue to work to make our county better.
Well, you folks are doing a wonderful job. We are doing, I believe, a progressive job in trying to make this an integrated, a fully integrated community and society. It is difficult with the great diversity we have to tolerate groups that like to be separate. But the Muslim community has always tried to be fully integrated with Americans and just be Americans. And frankly, that's good enough for all of us. That's good enough for all of us. Could you give us that contact information one more time, please? We're just about out of time.
Sure. The phone number that hopefully is appearing on your screen would be a great way to contact us.
Okay.
And as well as the bcmcmd.org website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on today, and I hope that you continue your good work and your fine work for all of us.
Thank you.
For Neighborhood Beat, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Zahir Rahman, who is a member of the Baltimore County Muslim Council, for being our guest today.
Thank
you, Zahir.
Thank you, Dr. Bill.
Keep up your good work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I would like to thank you for tuning in. Let's try to be a good neighbor out there in all of our neighborhoods, and we'll see you next time.